Atkins is a producer and musician, widely credited as the originator of Detroit Techno. Along with Derrick May, Saunderson and Eddie Fowlkes, they pioneered a new style of music that would change the way the world listened to music and the way the world thought about Detroit. In the middle and late 80s, Juan used the name Model 500 to record some of his hottest bangers to date. His recordings included songs such as No UFOs and the evocative Night Drive, which featured Atkins' whispered narration of a drive around Detroit's freeway system, and are considered like techno classics, you know. Well, much has been made of his pioneering early work, including Cybertron's Alleys of Your Mind, Channel 1, track Technicolor. A lot less attention has been paid to his continued efforts in progressing electronic music into tomorrow. You know, it's not just about the past. This is a guy who is still innovating as we speak. He's the man behind the first techno record label, Metroplex. He's been putting out cutting edge music for over 30 years. 30. That's amazing. I mean, that's crazy. Today, Juan is still very, very active. He flies all over the world as a DJ, spreading the gospel of the electronic music, but also as a producer. Juan's contributions to the electronic music genre is unprecedented and ongoing. So without much further ado, please welcome Mr. Juan Atkins. All of us have probably read, you know, the fable story of you know, you and Eddie and Derrick and Kevin meeting in high school and all that kind of stuff. But some of it is not as accurate as well as the truth. So where did this come from?
Well, I mean, you know, I always knew from an early age that I wanted to make music, make records. My dream was to make a record and just make a record. And I used to watch, they had TV, live concert TV shows back when I was like in elementary school. They had called In Concert and Saturday Night Special. And they would have like Sly and the Family Stone on there. And I mean, I was like mesmerized by Sly because the stage show was like crazy. And they would have, you know, the artists of that time, that era on there, who left Sly and the Stone. They would have James Brown on there. You know, it's just a lot of different artists. And I was like glued to the TV. And I actually would act like I was one of the stars of the 70s, you know, dancing around. My dad bought me an electric guitar for my 10th birthday. And so I would throw my own concerts and stuff at the house. What happened was my grandmother had this Hammond B3 organ, and that we used to play. You know, when we come home from school, I used to just bang, bang, bang. And when she would go to the music store and pick up like sheet music or accessories for this organ, I would go with her. And in the back, they had, in the back room, they had these new synthesizers that came out, like the Cord MS-10 and the Mini Moog. So while she was in the front doing her business in the front with the organ thing, I would be in the back room playing around with these synthesizers. And eventually one day I talked her into buying me one. I think it was, yeah, one day we went in, I think it was either my birthday or Christmas or something. And so I talked her into getting me this Cord MS-10. And from that point on, it was on,
right.
You know.
Were you trained?
No,
You were
no,
just
I was
doing it.
Just ad-lib,
okay.
Improvising, you know, and I was, I think I was pretty good at it, actually. You know, I would just watch other people that actually really knew how to play, and I would just copy what they were doing.
Okay.
You know, and you know, I mean, I wasn't like writing songs and nothing. I was only like 7 or 8 years old. Eventually, so I got this Cord MS-10 synthesizer, and I don't know if you know what it was a very new thing. Now, you know, synthesizers been around 20, 30 years now, 40 years now, so it's like it's nothing new, but it was real new at the time. And so it was like a real novelty type thing, you know, and it's like you could create all of these different sounds. And eventually what I did was, because I lived in Belleville at this time, and it wasn't a lot of musicians. Like when I was in Detroit, we would have garage bands, and like I would play with my friend around the block, and somebody down the street would be drummer, and guitar player was down the street. And but in Belleville, it was like the next closest person was like 10 miles away.
Right.
You know, so I found myself doing my own all of the parts myself.
Okay.
To make a track, and eventually I got pretty good at doing these at-home demos where, you know, I'm playing it. I use the synthesizer to make the actual drum kit, you know, because you can use white noise to make kick drums and snares, and, you know, and so I made up my own electronic kits, and you know, and I put together these demos with 2 cassette decks, and I would bounce between the 2 cassette and add a track every time I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, bounce.
What kind of stuff were you making?
I was making what I was influenced by. It was very George Clinton P-Funk influenced. It definitely had the funk rhythm track.
Okay.
And it was just. I mean, it was nothing really. That was my main influence at the time. So anything I was doing at that time definitely had strong. I mean, like those claps. You know, I made a clap kit on the Korg MS-10 and got those funkadelic claps.
Right.
Yeah, man. And so I had all of that in there, you know. And but it was just, you know, it was rough and raw, and but it was all electronic, you know. And so you know, at this time I was like a senior in high school. And I took a class in high school called Future Studies, and it was like a part of the history curriculum, you know, like a few, but not, well, basically, yeah, social studies, whatever. And so, and in this class, they the reference book for this class was called Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, and that was like the reference manual, and so. As I'm into this, reading this, you know, taking this class, you know, they were talking about, you know, how, you know, like the term, my first label called Metroplex, this term comes from a metro complex, which was a term in the book that meant 2 cities that grow so big that they become one metroplex or metro complex, like the Dallas-Fort Worth. Right. It's 2 different cities, but. Yeah. Right. So they say that one day Detroit and Chicago is going to grow so big that it's going to become the metroplex. So, you know, but, you know. So anyway, so I started to, you know, fashion my music around these terms and the stuff that I was reading, because, you know, what I was doing, like, well, this is the future, what I'm doing, but musically. And so, I started calling it techno, basically, because of the technological revolution that Alvin Toffler was talking about. He later came with another book called The Third Wave, which definitely, you know, delves a lot deeper into it. But I was just all about, you know, hey, this is the future, you know, and this is technology, this is the technological revolution. So that's where, you know, I figured, you know, I was like only like 16, 17 at the time, so I figured I was going to be around for another 20 or 30 years at least. So, you know, I need to do something that was going to stand the test of time, right. You know.
So anyway, so going back, so now you're getting to, you've been sort of this self-contained, you know, production outfit. Yeah. You know, and you know, where do you go after that? So I put together like this demo with this MS-10 and, you know, various things. And at this time, like I was high school senior at that time, but by the time, you know, I, you know, finished the demo and got it, you know, was riding around listening to it, I had graduated and was going to college. I went to Washington Community College, and I was taking, of course, all music courses in college, and I brought these demos one day to play in the class because I took a music theory class, and so it was all musicians in the class and other artists,
And so I brought this demo, and when I played the demo, it's like everybody in the class like went crazy about this music and wanted to hook up with me and play. And this one guy in particular, Rick Davis, was was also a synthesis, and actually he was a lot more advanced than I was, because he had sequencers and drum machine, the early DR55 drum machine. I wasn't aware of all of this, so Rick kind of introduced me to this stuff. And but from what I was doing on my demos was basically, I guess, sounding similar to what he had been doing with more advanced gear. When I went to his apartment, I mean, it was like walking into a spaceship, like a cockpit, man. It was like he had the lights down, and all you could see was these LEDs and these lights on these keyboards and stuff, man. And I was blown away. I came in with my little Korg MS-10 under my arm. It had one little blinking light on it. But we got together, and I hooked it up, and the first track that we did together on that day was Cosmic Rain Dance.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite tracks.
Yeah. Well, that was actually the first track we actually did together.
I didn't know that. Get out of here.
Yeah. Although it wound up being the B-side on Alleys of Your Mind we did later, but that was the actual first track. So basically, me and Rick got together and we made these tracks, and Derrick was like my best friend at the time in high school, but his family had moved to Detroit, and he lived in an apartment building right down the street from WGPR, where was the Mojo was on Jefferson, yeah, and so there was a place this was during the time when the arcade games were really big, like Pac-Man and Defender and Galaga and all of that. So he was at Burt's Place, which Burt's Place used to be on East Jefferson, right next to Pontchartrain. It was like a little complex, a strip mall right there, and he was in a shop right there, and like a cafe, and so Derrick would actually, when Mojo got off of work, he would come through this cafe, every now and then, and kind of decompress and drink a coffee or whatever. And so Derrick went down there and waited for him. And one day, he was going down there actually he was in his mom's car and drive down in the middle of the night, because Mojo didn't get off till like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so one day Mojo came in there, and Derrick got a chance to meet him and talk to him and say, "Hey man, my friend is making this music, and would you check it out?" And I think Derrick had a cassette, an early cassette of like whatever, I think it was Cosmic Rain Dance or something else we was doing. And he was able to play this cassette for Mojo, and Mojo invited us to come down.
Wow.
And and it was so funny because when we went to the station, we hadn't had that record press yet. We came down with I think it was a cassette, but we had more music than what he had heard from Derrick. I mean, he might have just heard a snippet or something. We, of course, we had evolved it by the time we were able to meet with him. And so he had his little office, and he was in there. This was during his reggae phase, He went into this phase where he was just playing all reggae music for about a year. So this is the time we happened to be able to catch him and meet him, right? So he's in his office, and he's playing this reggae track song on the turntable. And as this song is playing, he puts our cassette on and plays it at the same time as the other record is playing.
So this is 1 year?
No.
Okay.
This is in his office, right? No. That was crazy. That would have been crazy. No, but the thing is that he said that if your track makes me take this other record off, then it means it's good. And needless to say, he took the other record off. And so hey man, we ran out and you know, we went to the studio and refined it and got it mastered and pressed up some copies. And this was maybe 2-3 months later. And we took the actual record. It was a 45 record. This wasn't, you know, this was still on 45 singles. And so we gave it to Mojo, and sure enough, man, 2 days later, he played it. He you know, and it was one of the highest moments of my life, actually. You know, because because I mean, and this was, I mean, you know, it wasn't like the DJs mixing. It wasn't in the mix. Some DJ spinning it in the mix. This was actually played out by Mojo, you know, which was the icon at the time. I mean, to have Mojo play your record, man, it's like, wow, you know.
And this is crazy because this is not, you know, this is not coming from, you know, a major label. You know, you didn't have that machine behind you.
No.
These are a couple of dudes,
right?
You know, really from, I mean, just homeboys, you know what I'm saying, who made this, you literally made it happen. And this is what he liked. I mean, this is crazier than I ever thought it was. I've never heard all of this.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, this is amazing.
No, I mean, it's a lot of credit have to go to Mojo. Mojo, of course, you know, he'll take it. But yeah, I mean, without Mojo, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, actually.
Yes! So, let's talk about a couple of your tracks, though. Like, let's talk about Alleys of Your Mind. Where did that come from?
Alleys of Your Mind came, it was during the time when me and Rick was doing these sessions. A lot of the hits that we did with Cybertron were actually my tracks that, you know, Rick played parts on top of, but like the tracks like Alleys of Your Mind and Clear, this was like the tracks that I started with the rhythm track and the bass lines. All of that was my bass lines, all of that was my rhythm. And so basically how Alleys of Your Mind started with me in the basement coming up with the beat and the rhythm and the bass line. And so, you know, I came up with something, I put it on cassette, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. And I took it to the studio with Rick, and I played it, and, you know, so I set my stuff up and tried to, you know, was redoing what I had put on this cassette. Then Rick played a part on it, and, you know, eventually it turned out to be Alleys of Your Mind.
Sounds crazy.
You see what I'm saying? You can hear a little bit of flashlight in there. A little bit of, you know.
Is that you?
Yeah.
So this is I don't know. So you know, you did Alleys of Your Mind, like the Toffler influence, or Toffler, I'm sorry. It's present. There's one of the things I think that makes Detroit techno different, at least early on, was that there was a Cold Steel effect to it with the funk, but there was also this sort of darkness to it.
Yeah.
how important was like the Detroit aesthetic as far as an influence? Was that a factor at all?
Not a conscious factor.
Okay.
But I'm sure subconsciously all of that affected how what was in me came out.
Right.
You know, and yeah.
No, I want to go back to sort of the mythology of the Belleville crew. You know, the four of you.
Mm-hmm.
How did you? So you and Derrick were friends in high school. How did you meet Kevin?
Kevin was in high school as well.
And then Eddie.
And Eddie wasn't in Belleville.
Okay.
But Eddie, as like I said, Derrick moved to Detroit with his family, and they were how I became friends with Derrick and Kevin was actually through my brother Aaron.
Who's here, right?
Yeah, somewhere in the house.
Yeah.
But they were in his class.
Okay.
So he would come to the house and they would be with Aaron, know, and then eventually me and Derrick became cool. And their family moved to Detroit, so we had this back and forth thing to Detroit. And eventually we moved to Detroit after I graduated from high school.
Yeah,
so we all three went to Belleville High School. So that's how that came about. When then Eddie didn't go to Belleville. However, his record when Kevin. See, I was making music like 3 or 4 years before Kevin, Derrick, and Eddie.
Right.
You know, but his record happened to come out before Kevin and Derrick's records.
Okay.
You know, so. That's
what. Were they doing stuff independently, or was this? Is this?
No, I was teaching them everything.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, no, man, they would be Kevin would be calling my phone at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I remember having to go to Kevin's house at daybreak, like 6 in the morning, to show him how to use the S900 sampler. You know, and it was like I never got sleep because these guys was calling me up all night, all three of them, you know, and but basically they were able to, you know, I actually released everybody's first records.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how that kind of came about.
Okay, so I know at a certain point, somehow, some way, you know, the Virgin record came out in the UK. What
happened was our concept, man, was so dope. You know, it was like, you know, we had the labels, and the labels looked like it was $1 million behind these labels, man, and it was just, you know, just us with some ideas.
Right.
But to the world, it looked like, hey, this is something really going on. I mean, we had the Transplant logo was futuristic, the Metroplex logo, and all of that. People thought that it was like really something huge going, which it was, but you know, it wasn't as big as they thought it was.
Right.
As this technology became available we were ahead, we were first, but eventually kids in other cities picked up on these drum machines and synthesizers, like in Chicago, which is the next city to us, which you know, Chip E and Frankie Knuckles, they used to play 909s in the club.
Oh, okay.
You know, and then eventually they started making records. And it was kind of like parallel to our movement.
Mm-hmm.
But Chicago was sort of a bigger city, and they had like the Hot Mix 5 on the radio, and where we didn't really have, we had mix shows, maybe we had Can't Call You're on the Air for a couple of years. But Chicago continued, like even after the disco era kind of died, they kept going with the mixers and the Hot Mix 5. Right. It was like they were caught in this disco time warp. You know? And but it was cool because, you know, you could go to Chicago and hear mixes like on the weekend, man, 10 o'clock at night. It was all mixes on all 3 sections, you know, and so the scene got so huge that, you know, we would put out a record and we'd sell more records in Chicago than we did in Detroit.
Okay.
And Derrick and Blake Baxter actually Blake had a pickup truck and they used to fill this pickup with records and go down and drive them to Chicago every week, and and sell these records and go down like we go on a Friday and listen to the mix shows, tape the mix shows, and come back with fresh mix shows and money from the records.
Wow.
What happened was a lot of the UK labels, because the house out of Chicago became popular in northern England, but when the record labels came to Chicago to acquire the house music, they discovered Detroit. Because the funny thing is that our records were playing more like Farley, and they was playing our records more than they was playing their own records, and because we had that different twist, and it was like people were, I think, being more attracted to this, because we had this future edge to it, and so labels like Cool Cat, which is Neil Rushton, which wound up being our management, came to Chicago to pick up some house, and they said, "Oh, what is this Detroit stuff?" And they jumped on a train or a bus or whatever, a short flight, and be in Detroit. And so they eventually got our music, and Virgin was one of the labels that Neil pitched this Detroit music to, and the funny thing about that was that they were talking about putting this compilation together, and they were going to call it. This is how strong this connection was with Chicago. They were going to call it the house sound of Detroit. They were going to call it, the new house sound of Detroit.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Right. So I submitted a track called Techno Music. And they said, what? Wait a minute. And they changed the name of the album to the new Techno sound of Detroit. Right. And they pushed the hell out of it. And fortunately, there was Kevin was able to put together. I mean, a lot of people don't know, but that record was Big Fun was the hit off that album. But, I mean, that was James Pennington, that was me, that was Eddie Fowlkes made the drum track.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was Eddie
Fowlkes. Say this again. Say all of that again, because I didn't know that.
Big Fun, that was Eddie Fowlkes' drum track. I think Kevin did the percussion on it. That was, I did the bass line. James Pennington did the sample, and that sample, that was actually a sample of Get Brutal with the millimeter. Remember that? He sampled that, and that was big fun.
How the hell did I not know that? I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, but that was James Pennington.
Right.
Sample. And okay, I put the bass line on it because when they brought it to me, and I was like, wait a minute, man, it's missing something. So because they were just going with it, and so I said, well, wait a minute, and I put the bass, the under it to give it, to make it a record, make it a production. Right. And so that was Eddie, and I think Derrick was on that session, but yeah, Art Force played the piano on there, so that was like a group effort. Right. But,
Which is, again, you just blew my mind. So many years you're in something and you think you know something. You said you literally just, I had no idea.
But anyway, that record was the big record off that album, right, which lifted the whole album into public, notice. Right. So after that, it went huge, and it just went across the globe. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because that record is really kind of what made techno, the global definition of the sound coming out of Detroit. Yeah. Right. That was the first big record that labeled it as such. Yeah. So it's interesting to me that you actually. Your roots are actually in the production side of it, as opposed to, the DJ that turned producer. You're actually a producer that turned DJ. So, talk about how you.
Well, I mean, it was always hand in hand with me.
Okay.
I mean, I mean, even from like when I was in elementary school, like when my father would have parties at the house, I would be playing the music.
Okay.
But it's 45s dropping down on the spindle.
Right. But
I selected the order in which they dropped on the spindle.
Right.
So I always been a DJ at heart, and it all went hand in hand for me. Yeah.
All right. So the trajectory of the as the technology advanced with DJing and stuff, you went right along with it, and actually probably helped inspire some of it, on some level or whatever.
Well, there's another story that I guess a lot of people don't know. So I started. The first person that I heard when I heard mixing, I heard Ken Collier on WDRQ. It's called Disco DRQ at the time. What was it? I think it was Disco DRQ. And I'm like, man, I gotta. Wow, because I mean, on the radio, radio's the only place you heard records like, they would seg out and segue in. You know how you could hear the record overlap, but never on beat. This is the first time I heard records overlapping on beat, right? And I'm like, man, I gotta learn how to do that. So I found some people in the neighborhood that one of my friends down the road had a cousin that was a DJ from New York that had a mixer and turntables, and it was so funny because they would never let me get on the turntable. I mean, it was like I have to sneak and get on their turntable sometimes, and I would be begging, waiting. But eventually, I started to. That's how I picked up on the DJ thing. I picked up this DJing. And so I did a couple of parties out in the country, and backyard parties, garage parties, playing, and eventually when we started moving to Detroit, Derrick's family moved to Detroit. So me and Derrick got this idea to start this DJ company, and I actually taught Derrick how to spin, and then of course Kevin picked it up from Derrick. Because they were best buddies,
right.
And so that's how Detroit, how we started on the DJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the first time you went out of the country like? For this, I can only, I guess what I'm asking is, as a young kid from Detroit. All of a sudden being asked to come play overseas.
Well, it's like when these records, when I told you that they were going to Chicago and they were being exported, because Chicago had export shops. We didn't have export stores. Export. They would call import stores, but they would export at the same time.
Okay.
So as these records we were making filtered out, I guess one of the records that really caught on overseas was New Photo, which was the record that Derrick's first record, and he got invited over by Neil to come over. So Derrick was actually the first one to go.
Oh, okay.
And he kind of went over and surveyed the territory, and he came back and said, "Hey man, these guys, Cool Cat Records, they want to get down with us, and want to release our music and blah blah blah." So eventually, as we developed this relationship with Cool Cat, the first trip was to come over and do remixes. And the first time I went to England was the first time all of us went. We went to Birmingham. We didn't go to London. We went to actually Birmingham, which is where Cool Cat was based. Okay. And that's like northern England, northwest, and. Is it? Oh, anyway, north, and so we were doing these remixes, and to basically pay for the trip, and we'd stay over there for a couple of weeks, and we do these mixes, and this was at a time when there wasn't the international DJ thing hadn't really developed as well, so so this is something that was at its infancy stage as well. and they probably at that time wouldn't have flown us from Detroit to London.
Just a DJ.
Just a DJ.
Okay.
We were already there doing production work and remixes, and we were just spinning a gig.
Okay.
And,
Right.
you know, while we were there, which eventually turned out to something. Hey, well, you don't have to be over here to be in production. We'll just fly you over, and to evolved, and then other all DJs all over the world started crisscrossing the globe.
Right.
You know.
And the rates just keep going on.
Yeah, but I can remember the first gig that I actually played. And this was probably after maybe about the second or third time I had went to the UK, and it was a film studio, and it was about 5,000 kids in this film studio, and me and maybe one of the sound crew or the roadie crew was the only two black guys in the whole place. Out of 5,000 people, right? So,
well, at least it wasn't the janitor.
Needless to say, though, this was kind of a culture shock for me because, I mean, you can imagine coming from Detroit,
Right.
the kind of gigs that we used to go to and used to play,
Right.
and to have 5,000 white kids dancing to what you playing,
Right.
it was like, but that was Europe, it's a whole different mentality. It's like, it's a good feeling to see that your music can cut across different racial boundaries, and that's always a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's really magical. I mean, what you've created.
Yeah.
Do you ever stop and think about like I mean, we as people don't often think about like our quote unquote achievements and like, does it ever hit you with what you've done, what you created, and how it's affected the world?
Yes, of course. I think about that every day. But I always think I can do more.
Okay.
And it's because now with how technology is now, it's like it's a constant barrage of updates and so much you have to learn and know that it's just it's kind of overwhelming in a way, but it's just something that I do.
It's hard with being an artist with as much history as you do, because it's sometimes that is what people know, and they forget that you are actually still out there doing stuff. So what are you doing right now? You just put out a record not too long ago, right?
Yeah, I just released the album Digital Solutions earlier in 2015. Right now, we've been developing the live show, and and now we want to update the live show. So, because right now what the music industry is more emphasis now. Records don't really sell too much no more. It's all, there's digital downloads and everything. So, for artists to make a living solely on record sales is a thing in the past.
Okay.
So it's more emphasis on live. What artists making the bulk of their money now is from live performances. So, the objective is to hone the live presentation. So that's one of the major things that I'm focusing my attention on. It's like we want to do this. We want to stay on the cutting edge, and not just with the music, but how the music is presented and performed. Still sound fresh.
I know, it does.